From the studios of Cheshire TV in Keene, New Hampshire, it's The Men's Room, a show by men, about men, and for everyone. Sponsored by the Monadnock Men's Resource Center and hosted by Damian Licata and Forrest Seymour.
The Men's Room, a show that we do every week, a show by men.
About men.
About men and for everyone.
That's right.
The show is sponsored by the Monadnock Men's Resource Center.
That's right. A volunteer group located here in Keene that also sponsors a drop-in support group for men every Sunday night, 7 o'clock at 25 Roxbury Street, right next to Obashon's Hardware. And in fact, we are going to spend the show today talking about the drop-in support group with a man who knows.
That's right. So if you've been curious about what we're talking about and you'd like some more information,
stay tuned.
Please stay tuned, because we're going to be talking a lot about what the experience is like in the men's group.
In fact, record this on TiVo and watch it several more times just so you get the details down.
Yeah, right. I would memorize it if I were you, and then I would pass it around to all of your friends.
That's right.
So we really want to get to that, but I want to talk a little bit about something that I heard on the news this morning coming into work.
Yes, indeed.
A really sad incident involving a couple of Keene State College students.
That's right.
Who were living off campus.
Mm-hmm. And apparently, you know, based on what I've seen on the internet, basically they were two students who we don't know what happened. One of them shot the other one, who was going to be okay, but the shooter then took his own life.
Right.
And very sad, and our sympathies to everybody, families and everybody involved. I mean, it's really a horrible situation.
And their friends on campus as well.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
But also all the more troubling in the wake of the Virginia Tech.
It is, and you know, of course, the questions are going to arise. Was this related? Was he inspired by, or you know, who knows what was going on? I mean, it occurred at 2 o'clock in the morning, as opposed to the middle of the day or the morning. You know, in this other incident, and which was clearly planned.
Right, and this was off campus. It was in their apartment. Their roommates.
That's right. Yeah. So there was this personal relationship. So it's hard to know, really. I mean, there's at this point, it's early days yet. There's not a lot of information in terms of what motivated this young man,
but it is another example of men's violence. You know, in this case, focused at other men, and you know, a piece of what we in the Monadnock Men's Resource Center, many other people really want to work to try to prevent.
That's right. You know? Yep. And you know, the idea that somebody could have readily at hand for what really does seem like an impulsive act in this instance. A firearm, a loaded firearm, is also a question, I think, that we need to have more serious discussion about.
So it's a horrible thing. I mean, part of the reason, I mean, sort of, you know, going into our topic today, one of the things that we hope that the support group that we offer provides is a place for men to go to talk about what's troubling them, to have some support, you know, camaraderie around their troubles, just to prevent.
That's right. I mean,
this is the worst case scenario, but this is the sort of thing it's there to prevent.
That's right. You know, who knows? I mean, you know, if one or both of these young men had come into our support group some Sunday night, you know, talked about whatever may have been, you know, brewing over time here, they might have gotten a different perspective. They might have heard something different from somebody else in the room. It might have shifted something for them.
Not felt alone.
Exactly. Not felt alone in it, or maybe realized that there was another way to deal with this.
Right. You know. Well, let's talk to a man who knows all sorts of different ways to deal with things.
That's right.
Our guest today.
Yep. Our guest tonight.
Who is Joe Santry, who is originally from Brooklyn, New York. Brooklyn by the Sea, as he likes to say.
Where my dad's from.
Is that right?
Yes.
Well, it's all in the family here. But he's lived in Brattleboro for 14 years, and he's an optometrist, has a practice in Brattleboro. And about 3 years ago started coming to our group and has since gotten very involved, and we're really pleased and proud to have you on the Men's Room, Joe. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome to the Men's Room.
Thank you.
So yeah, go ahead. You first.
Thanks.
After you.
Well, thank you, sir. One of the things that we wanted to ask you about was, you know, obviously something, inspired you to come to the men's group in the first place, to come to our drop-in group. And I think it would be, interesting to hear what it was. How did you hear about us? And what was it about what you heard that made you think, well, maybe I'd like to check this out?
Okay. It was a time in my life when I was looking at different aspects of relationships. And I happened to see an advertisement for a group in Brattleboro that was posted on the bulletin board of my gym about, getting to know yourself better, strengthening relationships, getting along better with people, and it just fell at the right time to me. So I went to this group, and I went twice, and it just didn't seem like the right fit. But there was a man there who came up to me a few weeks later at the gym and said, there's a group of men that meet in Keene on Sunday nights, really healthy men, and you might want to check it out. So he told me what the times were that the group met. So a few weeks later I did in fact go. And I have to say right from the start I was very impressed with what I encountered there, because it's a group that is structured, is very much aware of what each man's story is, and that was one of the first things that really impressed me, the idea of story. What is your life story, whether it's that day, that week, or as we get to know each other, the overarching story. And I just felt that this was a place that I could come and talk when I had to talk, and more importantly, listen when I had to listen. And I think that the format that exists in the group is something that I know worked very well for me, addressed my needs very well.
And the group has a very clear format that we follow every week, and ground rules are read at the beginning of each one. So it's about creating a safe environment for folks. One of the things that I've heard in terms of resistance to coming to the group, when I've mentioned it to other men or other people, I've mentioned it to men in their lives, and have told me that oftentimes they'll say, I don't want to sit there and listen to a bunch of other guys' problems. It just that's not something I'm interested in. I'll end up it just make me depressed, and I'll feel worse. And what's your take on that aspect of it? What was your experience in terms of the hearing other men's stories?
Well, I guess it would depend on how much you value compassion. And there are some guys out there, some people out there that just, hey, I don't want to hear about it. And that's fine, I respect that. I don't necessarily subscribe to that, nor do I think that's a particularly helpful thing in terms of society, but if that's one's choice, that's one's choice. What happens with me in the group is that I get a chance, and have gotten a chance, to listen to stories that make me look at my life and say, thank God, I'm really blessed. And it's also made me, I think, a better man in that I've learned to listen and to suspend judgment. And you mentioned the ground rules. I think that the ground rules are just an incredibly well thought out structure to making the evening really work. From the idea of confidentiality, that what's said in the group stays in the group, no names, the idea of acceptance, no matter who you are, what kind of background, what kind of religion, race, creed, sexual preference, whatever, it doesn't matter. And the idea of non-judgmental, the non-judgmental approach, where I think I've grown as a man because I've listened to people, and when I would catch myself saying, oh, I know what the answer to this guy's problem is, or, why don't you, I just remember that part of it, and I let that man be himself. And so I feel like I've grown as a result. And as I said, I listen to some stories, and I come away with a great deal of respect and honor for that man for dealing with this. I mean, my classic story for myself is, a year ago I was planning a trip, And you know, there was a lot going into it, going to a foreign country, and you know, it's a little stressful. So I mentioned that, and in the check-in process, we all talk about what's going on. And the man after me dropped about 6 bombs that were going off in his life, dealing with, you know, his recovering from alcoholism, his being homeless, his trying to take care of an old man who was, you know, had some kind of senile dementia, and it just struck me that this was the spectrum of things that could affect men, and yet this man had the courage to come in here and be with this group and share with this group. So it put my life and my problems into perspective that couldn't have happened anywhere else, and I was very grateful for that moment.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think is nice about the group is that there is some diversity of men who come, you know, different men from different, you know, as you said in the ground rules, you know, everyone's welcome, and in fact, lots of people come different ages, different economic backgrounds, different, you know, racial, sexual orientation, you know, all those kinds of things. So you end up with conversations happening between men who might not otherwise cross paths, and support, you know, and curiosity about each other that gets a place for men to talk in a way that, you know, we don't create. You know, we got the men's room here where we try to have some of these conversations, but the world isn't set up to give men a chance to kind of share what's going on inside of them often.
I think that diversity is a really important aspect of the group. You know, what you're saying, that these are men who might not normally, very likely would not have an occasion to sit in a room and have a conversation with each other. You know, there are men who come from, you know, all different directions and different, you know, socioeconomic status and educational levels and so forth. And I think what most men find, and you can speak to this too, I'm sure, is that there's a lot more commonality discovered there than difference in the experience of men.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that's, I mean, we start with the commonality of being men, and I think the beauty of how the group works, and this is just of its own, it's not like it's shepherded or herded by the facilitators, it's just what comes and what's allowed to happen, that we all hear something in each other's story. And you know, you mentioned the diversity. There's a young man that's attending the group lately that whose story I'm listening to with great interest, and I feel very happy when this young man is here, because he's expressed how when he leaves the group at the end of the evening, he just feels great. He just feels like a weight's been lifted. And I know from experience that there's a connection that forms there. And it's nothing like, wow, I've discovered my new best friend or anything. There's just, for me, one of my issues is isolation. That there's less isolation. There's a sense of being connected. And there's a sense of you can bring something that may be on your mind, that you're struggling with, whether it's your relationship or your work or the people at work or whatever.
Family stuff.
Family, whatever it's there. You have some place to put it out in front of you and to speak it. And you're not going to get 6 people saying, well, this is what you do, this is what you should do, because that's not the culture of the group. It's rather, let me speak this out, and somewhere somebody is going to communicate an idea that I didn't have, or by just speaking it out and putting it out there, I'll get an idea, maybe because it's off my chest for the first time, or maybe because in speaking it, all of a sudden I see a solution, or I see an approach that I didn't have before, because I don't talk to my plants in my room, or I don't, you know, the cats don't answer back, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and on another piece that I think is explicit about the group is about not giving advice, particularly unsolicited advice, that I think does really add to that culture you're talking about of acceptance and just listening and support, because men, you know, we're so quick to want to give advice, and I think that comes from a well-meaning place where we see a problem and we want to fix it. You know, I mean, you know, we're sort of enculturated to, like, you know, be the problem solver, you know. But we get so much of that. It's so refreshing to get to go and sit in a circle of men and not have all this advice given to you, but just to be heard. And then people have to or choose to just sit with it.
And some men struggle with that, I think, in the group.
With not giving.
With not giving advice, and not. It seems like a foreign concept in some ways. You know, if somebody is telling you, you know, about a challenge that they're having, or something that seems somehow a problem, you know, as you said, you know, often a typical male response is, well, you know what I would do in that situation? Or,
have you tried?
Or here's what you should do. And that doesn't always feel supportive.
Right.
You know, oftentimes it feels like you're being told that you're not doing it right in some way. But I think until you're on the receiving end, a room full of advice, you don't really get that, what that can feel like.
Well, you know, it's funny that you mention that, because you would kind of feel like, oh, everybody else has the answer, I don't. I must be some kind of dope or something. Counter to that was, at the end of my first session, I remember one of the facilitators using the term honor. That he honored me for coming and sharing my story. And how seldom we hear the word honor as applied to ourselves. I mean, it's such a rare word anyway, but the fact that he said, I honor you for coming tonight and sharing your story with us, it made me feel like I was part of the group from then on. And I think that was some kind of a defining moment. I try to remember that as a facilitator. If I'm dealing with somebody who, you know, or I'm addressing somebody who has really come forward with some painful things, or is there for the first time, that I remember the power of being honored for me. And I think that is something that's so important to us.
It's a kind of recognition, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's something that we rarely get often, particularly if you know, men don't usually do it for each other, unless it's in some, you know, honorarium dinner or something.
Right.
You know, we usually don't just, you know, say, you know, I really just want to acknowledge, you know, who you are, and we don't do that very often. So I can see where that can be a very powerful experience. And the fact of the matter is that it does happen fairly routinely in our group, that men will do that for each other.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's funny, because that's where the true essence of support comes, I think, in the group. And I'll tell you from my perspective, hearing the term support group, little, you know, hairs go up on the back of my neck when I think of support group, because I think of, you know, people lying around, oh, I'm in such terrible shape. You're in terrible shape. I'll tell you what terrible shape is. And it's not that. I mean, I would quibble with calling it a support group. Yes, that's what it is, but there are so many other support groups out there that I'd love to find a better way to communicate what this group does for being, you know, for being yourself, for just, hey, come on in, and if it's your night where you're having a tough time, let us hear about it. And if it's not your night, we're going to feel better. You're here to listen to us. And it's just, I mean, hearing this young man talk about how great he feels when he leaves the group was really uplifting. You know, that's right. And he's a guy that I think is going to have an easier path in the decisions that he's facing, because he has the ability to express what the issues are. Not that anybody's going to say, okay, here's the list, here's your to-do list that we have come up with because you can't do it, but rather, hey, we're glad you shared that with us.
And you know, and he, you know, like many men who come to that group, there are decisions that you're grappling with, trying to decide which way do I go, what's the right way to do this, and you get that information often by just talking about it, by having the opportunity to sort of, you know, verbalize, you know, the various, you know, things that are swimming around a particular issue. It gets some, you get some clarity.
Well, I think we are,
without anybody telling you this is the way to think about it.
And we are social creatures, you know, that I think that we we by verbalizing it allows us to sort of process the information in a different way. It's a different learning style, all that kind of stuff. So, and if isolation, which is, whether it's isolation in the sense of like physically being alone, or isolation in the sense of not having people to share our lives with and talk about the details of our lives, I think isolation is just harder to think things through. So
Absolutely.
You had mentioned that you were a facilitator,
Yes.
In addition to attending the group, and you had said that you felt very early on like you were part of something when coming to the group. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit, speak to how that might be connected, and what your
so that transition from
attending
facilitating,
to
yeah.
becoming a facilitator.
Well, I think early on I was impressed with the mission of the group in what it was doing. And I saw that, in fact, that was where all the energy was. And so I felt that I would like to be part of that, and I was quite honestly honored by being invited to become a facilitator, because I have great respect for the skill in which my fellow facilitators, from whom I'm always learning, will keep the group true to the ground rules, true to its mission, true to what we want it about. And so when I was asked, I accepted, as I said, feeling very honored, and went through the training and found that, I guess with a clinical background to some degree, being a healthcare provider, I'm trained to listen, on some kind of objective level. But the challenge is to be part of the group and to be a facilitator. That's always an interesting.
Right. We should say that our facilitators have that dual role. Even as a facilitator, you're also acting as a participant.
Correct. And really, truly part of the group, not as though you're sitting on the lifeguard stand and everybody else is down on the beach. You're really in that circle. And I found the opportunity to facilitate made me an even better listener, and helped with the compassion that, as I said, I think is an important quality in people. And yet I didn't find it to be exhausting or this is beyond me. As I said, I've learned from you and the other facilitators I've worked with, and so I think that I've been growing into the role and really understanding the group dynamic, and where we want to always be true to the mission of the group, where you can just come and you can talk. And you mentioned earlier that it's a natural thing for guys to want to give advice, and well, we can fix it. And in fact, that's where the challenge comes, where you want to keep that caring interest in the one who wants to give advice, but rather teach him the culture of, we're not here for that, because that implies that the other person can't do it himself. And one of the things that I found is that, in fact, you can do it yourself when you have that opportunity to speak.
So your path to facilitating was attending the group for a year or something or other, and then
Yes.
Going through the training. And there are other facilitators who like didn't attend the group first, but volunteers who have offered to help facilitate. And I just wanted to make the point to our audience that we are always looking for new facilitators. In fact, right now we're preparing to train facilitators, so we're really glad to have people contact us about that and become part of the team, and after doing the training and all that. So, and has it, I mean, one of the things I like to think about the facilitation role and sort of that, I mean, I feel like the group provides a community with a place for men to come as a support group, or whatever we want to call it. If we don't want to call it, I mean, we struggle with the name too.
Anyone has a better name for it, we'd like to hear it.
That's right.
Let's have a contest.
Good idea. But part of what was offered is the place for men to come talk. But another part of what's offered is the role of facilitating for some men, such as yourself, who want to sort of give back a little bit, or to the community or to the group or whatever. And I mean, you sort of touched on that, but I mean, how has that been for you to sort of move from that role of being a participant to that role of being you know, facilitator. And we should say also that you now are on our steering committee for the organization. So, you know, you have sort of moved up, you know, up, I don't know, over, you know, but taken on more.
Around.
What's that been like, you know? I mean, thinking about where you were at, whatever, 3 years ago, and where things are at today, if you don't mind my asking.
Well, I'm certainly a better man today than I was 3 years ago in terms of just feeling settled in my own emotional life, which was at certain times in turmoil, you know, through this time. I feel that the group has offered me the place to go where I can sort things out and not necessarily have somebody sort them out for me. And so being able to keep that going, to not only facilitate the group on Sunday night, but to facilitate the existence of the group as a concept is, to me, a very, very strong motivation, because I think it's great that this group exists. Pardon my bold praise, but you know, I think that if more guys knew that there was a place where they could come and just, you know, if they feel like their approach to life ain't working, or if their approach to life is just, there's something that I'm not getting, you know, that's the first light that goes off, and when many people begin what's called a journey, you know, where they begin to change because they realize this isn't working for me. This group I found to be a great place to go and have a non-threatening, completely safe experience in just beginning to try to communicate what it is that's going on inside, what's going on around you that you're not happy about. And in my own life and the lives of the others that I've listened to, you know, there's ups and downs, there's ebbs and flows. You know, there's some weeks where, hey, I'm good, I'm thankful that everything's fine. There's other weeks where, you know, I went through this thing you both remember, you know, I have a girlfriend down in New York City. This guy moved in next door to her. This guy was going to ruin my life. I just knew it, and you know. But hearing myself talk about that, I said, whoa, okay, I'm finding out that that's my button. So to have that kind of resource available, I think people would be wise to take, to make the most of it, because it really is a wonderful resource to have.
Well, that's a great moment to end on, because we have to end.
We got about a minute.
So thank you so much, Joe.
Thanks for coming
joining
on.
us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Your own experience with the group. I think it's important to hear from.
And better for your involvement.
I mean, people hear us talking about this group every week at the beginning and the end of every show. I think it's great to get the opportunity to actually hear it, you know, from the participants' mouth.
That's right.
What that experience is like.
So there'll be our URL and phone number at the end of it with the credits. You can give us a call, check out our website, get more information about the group.
That's right.
Let us know what you think. Call us. Come stop by the group.
And you can use those same routes to give us feedback about this show.
That's right.
We are always interested in hearing what people think. You know, we love to hear praise, but I'm also, you know, we would really like to hear from people who may take issue with something they hear on the show.
Go to our website. You can get to our archive of shows on YouTube, and there's places to comment there as well.
That's right. So thanks for tuning into the Men's Room.
That's right.
And we will see you next time.
Next time, and on the web.
With a brand new guest.
You bet. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
That was
Good.
I like the way you wrapped it up there. That was really good.
That comes from my showbiz experience.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, I'm surrounded by actors here.
I was going to ask you, you know, for if you had if you had one thing to say to somebody who might be on the fence about coming.